The rain was coming down in sheets, loud and relentless, but I didn't flinch as it soaked through my hair and dress. My heels sank slightly into the muddy front yard, but I didn't turn back. Not even when I heard my father's voice roar one last time from the porch. "You'll regret this mistake, Emily." His words cut through the storm like a blade. But I didn't say anything. Not a word. I just kept walking. 20 years old and alone, with a soaked suitcase that had one busted wheel and barely enough to get me through the night. My makeup had smeared from crying hours ago, and my fingers trembled as I gripped the handle tighter. Behind me, the house I had grown up in stood glowing in the warm light of the porch, a lie wrapped in comfort. But inside, there was no love, no kindness, only control, only silence. And now, abandonment. I had married Christopher without their permission, without their blessing, without my father's stern nod or my mother's carefully measured approval. And that was unforgivable. At least to them. He called it betrayal. But what he really meant was disobedience. They didn't care that Christopher loved me like no one else had. That he saw me when no one else did. That he stayed by my side when I was crumbling from years of silent rejection, never feeling good enough no matter how hard I tried to earn their love. And now they had thrown me out. Like trash. I walked for 3 miles before a gas station clerk let me dry off in the corner of his break room. I slept in that plastic chair that night, with nothing but my wedding ring and a heart that had been torn apart by the people who were supposed to protect me. I never looked back. That was 17 years ago. Now, standing in front of a glass-paneled entryway of a quiet upscale neighborhood in Seattle, I heard the sound. Ding-dong. It echoed through the hallway. I glanced at the mirror near the door and adjusted the gold pendant at my collarbone. My hair was pinned up in a graceful twist, and I was wearing a navy silk blouse tucked neatly into tailored beige pants. Not to impress. Not to prove anything. Just to feel like myself, the woman I had become. One who wasn't asking for love anymore. She was love, power, grace, fire, and forgiveness, all wrapped into one. I opened the door slowly, unsure who had arrived so early. And there they were. My father, my mother, soaked from the rain. But not in the same storm this time, no. They were dressed properly. His gray hair combed, a leather briefcase in hand. My mother's blazer stiff, but her eyes sunken. Something had changed in both of them. Something hollow. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. They didn't speak. They didn't ask to come in. They didn't even say my name. Instead, both of them dropped to their knees, right there on my marble porch, gasping like they'd seen a ghost. Because the girl they had thrown into a storm at 20 now stood in front of them. Calm, whole, powerful, and nothing like the obedient, desperate for approval daughter they remembered. I didn't smile. I didn't rush forward. I simply stepped aside and said softly, "You can come in if you're ready to tell the truth." And just like that, the storm they had thrown me into all those years ago came roaring back, but this time it was theirs to weather. Their knees made a soft thud against the stone entryway, but the silence that followed was thunderous. My father, once proud, once unshakable, looked up at me like he didn't know whether to beg or bark. His cheeks, once flushed with rage, were pale now. My mother trembled beside him, one hand clutched to her chest, her lips parted, but unable to form a word. I didn't offer them help. I didn't rush to comfort them. I had done that once. I had begged for crumbs of love once. Not anymore. They stared at me like they had seen something they never thought possible. And maybe they hadn't. 17 years ago, I was a scared, shaking 20-year-old girl, soaked to the bone and thrown out like a shameful mistake. Tonight, I was standing tall in a $5 million home, wearing confidence like it was armor and power like it was perfume. Christopher built this life with me from nothing. From dirt and steel and long nights and short paychecks. From hope that scraped the bottom of our pockets. From love that wasn't performative but relentless. He wasn't here now. He was at the hospital working another double shift. Still healing lives. Still the same man who'd found me in a parking lot 17 years ago, curled up in the back seat of his rusted pickup, trying not to cry so loud that strangers would notice. I stepped aside without a word. Let them walk in. Let them see. Let them feel the warmth, the richness, the truth of what I had built. Without them. The marble floors. The soft piano music humming from the walls. The smell of rosemary and fresh-baked bread lingering from breakfast. The oil paintings on the wall, one of which they didn't recognize. It was of me. Pregnant. Glowing. A soft sunset behind me, and my hand resting on my round belly, eyes closed like I was dreaming of a future no one else could see yet. My mother's breath caught in her throat when she saw it. My father's eyes hardened, not with anger this time, but shame. I saw it clearly. He tried to hide it, but he couldn't. He had thrown me out when I needed him the most. When I was scared. When I was still learning how to be a woman. A wife. A daughter. But more than that, he threw me out not for what I had done, but for who I had chosen. Christopher. The son of a mechanic. A man with grease on his hands and love in his eyes. A man who didn't ask for permission. Only for my heart. My father couldn't handle that. He had wanted me to marry Senator Mitchell's son. Polished. Ivy League. Empty. The kind of man who looked good on a family tree, but hollow behind closed doors. I didn't want a man who owned the world. I wanted one who'd fight for me when the world turned its back. And now, all these years later, the silence in the room was deafening. I folded my arms as they slowly sank onto the leather couch, not asking for water, not asking for forgiveness, yet. Just sitting there, barely breathing. I didn't expect a call, I said, voice calm but firm. Much less a visit. My father cleared his throat. We didn't come to argue. My eyes locked on his. That's a first. His jaw clenched, but he didn't lash out like he used to. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe something in him finally knew I wouldn't bend like I did at 20. We need your help, my mother said quietly, her voice cracked with age and regret. Those words felt like ice water down my spine. I tilted my head. Help. We lost everything, my father said. The house. The company. The pension. Where we're staying in a motel off Route 9. The irony hit hard. The man who once called Christopher a poor excuse for a future was now sitting in my $1 million living room, jobless and homeless. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, why not ask your perfect son-in-law? Oh, wait. You never had another daughter, did you? My mother flinched. We made mistakes, Emily. I looked at her. No, I said. You made a choice. She looked away, tears beginning to swell. I remember that night, I continued, my voice low and steady. I remember the way you stood there, silent, while he screamed at me. I remember packing my things while your hands just trembled at your sides. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. You could have said, stop. That's what you could have done. Silence again. They didn't argue, because there was no argument left. Just consequences. I looked between them and said the words I never imagined I'd get to say. You threw me into a storm with nothing but a suitcase, and now here you are, soaked in one of your own. So tell me. I leaned in slightly. What exactly are you hoping to find on the other side of this door? My father looked at me, and this time, his voice cracked too. Redemption. And in that single word, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Fear. Not of me, but of the reality he had built, and how it had finally spectacularly crumbled. I stared at my father for a long time after he said it. Redemption. It tasted foreign coming from his mouth, like a word he had heard but never used, never understood until now. I didn't rush to respond. I wanted him to feel the weight of the silence, the cold stillness of my home as it wrapped around his regret. He had always filled rooms with volume, shouting, lecturing, controlling. But now, he couldn't even fill a whisper. My mother's hands trembled in her lap. I noticed her nails were chipped, her wedding ring loose on her thinning fingers. Her eyes flickered toward the hallway, where family photos lined the wall. Photos they weren't in. Photos of Christopher holding our newborn daughter in the hospital, tears in his eyes. Photos of us at the small bakery we opened with nothing but alone and hope. Photos of me holding a plaque for Businesswoman of the Year, standing in front of our third franchise location, in the same strip mall where I once cried in the back of a pickup. And one more, a framed newspaper headline. From homeless to hero, Emily and Christopher Reeves turned struggles into million-dollar bakery chain. They hadn't seen it. They hadn't even known. Because I had disappeared from their world the night they forced me out. And I never looked back. I don't think you came here for redemption, I said slowly, keeping my voice even. I think you came here because the people you once chose over me, your investors, your partners, your name, don't answer your calls anymore. His face twitched, like I'd said something that hit a little too close. And now, I added, you're here because I do. He lowered his eyes. I watched him for a moment, then looked at my mother. 17 years, Mom. I gave birth without you. I bled without you. I learned how to make bread in a cramped kitchen without running water. I watched Christopher faint from exhaustion trying to keep us afloat. You didn't call. You didn't write. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her with a quiet shake of my head. You don't get to cry now, I whispered. I cried for both of us for too long. A sharp knock on the back door made me pause. Then I smiled slightly. Perfect timing, I said. I walked to the back of the house and opened the door. A tall, striking woman stood there with a clipboard and a box in her arms. Morning, Emily, she greeted. Special delivery from Greenfield High. They said it's urgent. Thanks, Tina, I smiled. Come inside. She walked in, nodded politely to my parents, and handed me the box. What's this? My father asked cautiously. I opened it slowly. Inside were brochures, a polished wood plaque, and a letter embossed in gold. I turned the letter around so they could read it. To Mrs. Emily Reeves, we are honored to announce the renaming of Greenfield High's Culinary Arts program to the Emily Reeves Institute of Entrepreneurship and Baking. Your generous endowment has changed lives. Thank you. The plaque glistened. My father blinked, disoriented. You're donating to high schools now? I laughed once, soft but firm. I'm rewriting the future, the one you tried to steal from me. He looked stunned. But my mother? She began to cry, silently, with dignity, like she finally saw what I had built. But I wasn't done. I opened the bottom of the box and pulled out an old photo, one they hadn't seen in years. It was taken the night they kicked me out. Me, 20 years old, drenched, mascara running, standing outside the house as the storm howled. I had given the photo to a reporter who'd done a story on our bakery years ago. It all started here, I said softly, holding the photo up. With a girl you threw away because she chose love over your reputation. My father finally spoke again, his voice breaking. I was wrong. The words hung heavy in the air. I didn't understand then what I was doing. You understood, I said. You just didn't care. He swallowed hard. We do now. I leaned forward slightly. And why now? I asked. What changed? He didn't answer. But he didn't have to. Because I already knew. They were old. They were broken. And they were alone. The empire he'd built collapsed in the last market crash. Their insurance was gone. Their savings drained. They had no one left who would listen. Except the daughter they once discarded. And I had everything. But I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to make them grovel. I wanted them to see me, not just as the woman I had become, but as the girl they had failed. And then I would decide what happened next. My father sat on the edge of the couch like he was suddenly too big for the room. He used to command spaces, his voice, his presence, his money. But now, his hands trembled on his knees, his wedding band slipping slightly on his finger. I could tell he wanted to speak, to argue maybe, but there was nothing left to argue. The truth was already sitting between us. My mother finally broke the silence. We didn't come here expecting anything, Emily. We didn't know where else to go. I watched her carefully. She was thinner than I remembered, older too, but it wasn't just age. It was wear. A kind of weight that had nothing to do with years and everything to do with regrets. Do you remember what you said to me that night? I asked softly. She looked confused, then ashamed. Her eyes dropped. You said, it's best to leave now before your father says something worse. I paused. But the worst thing was your silence. She blinked back tears. My father turned toward her like he was hearing that line for the first time too. You both turned away from me when I needed you most. And now what? You want help paying for a motel room? A handout? No, my father said suddenly. Not a handout. Just maybe a chance to make things right. I tilted my head. You can't rewrite the past, Dad. You can't erase 17 years of absence. He nodded slowly. I know, but maybe I can be present now. That nearly cracked something inside me. For a split second, I saw him. Not the proud man who humiliated me, but the father I had begged for back then. The one I used to imagine holding my hand during childbirth. Walking me down the aisle. Just listening. I looked away toward the photo on the wall of Christopher and me, laughing in a bakery kitchen, flour on our cheeks. We had made a home from nothing. A business from struggle. A family from scraps of love we gave each other freely. They had nothing to do with it. And yet, here they were, broken enough to show up. Humble enough to stay quiet. Desperate enough to kneel. I turned back to them. You don't get to come back into my life like nothing happened. But I sighed. You are here. And you're finally listening. My mother's head snapped up, hope flickering across her face. So here's what I'll offer, I said clearly. Not a loan. Not a house. Not forgiveness. Not yet. They froze. But I'll let you stay in the guest house. For a week. 1 week. You'll cook for yourself. Clean up after yourselves. No staff. No luxury. Just time. Time to see what it feels like to live with what you've done. If after that week you still want to talk, we'll talk. They didn't protest. Didn't beg. They just nodded. For once in their lives, they were silent. And somehow, that said more than any apology ever could. The guest house sat at the edge of the property. Modest but warm, with wide windows that overlooked the garden Christopher and I had planted years ago. It wasn't luxury, but it was peace. Something my parents had never known how to offer. Something they were now being forced to sit with. For 7 days, they stayed there. I didn't check on them. I didn't invite them for dinner. I let them exist quietly, for once, in the background of my life, like I had existed in theirs after they cast me out. Christopher came home 2 nights later and listened without saying much. That's how he was, steady, calm, never needing to fill silence with noise. He wrapped his arms around me on the porch as I stared out into the dark, the warm scent of cedar and cinnamon on his shirt anchoring me to the ground. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. I thought I'd feel powerful having them here, but I just feel tired. He kissed the top of my head. Because you're carrying something you should have never had to. That hit harder than I expected. The next morning, I found my mother folding laundry on the small patio behind the guest house. No maid, no dry cleaning, just her, a wooden bench, and the sound of birds in the trees. She looked up, startled, and quickly wiped her hands on her faded pants. I didn't expect you this early, she said. I wanted to ask something, I replied. What happened to all of it? The business. The house. The pride. She looked down at her hands. Gone. All of it. Bad investments. Too much debt. And when the last client pulled out, she trailed off. We didn't have anything left. My voice was steady. Now you understand what it's like to lose everything. She nodded slowly. I do. Do you understand what it's like to lose a child? Her eyes filled. That's what we lost the day you walked into that storm. No, I said. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. Tears slid down her cheeks. And I've regretted it every single day since. I didn't cry, because I had cried enough for all of us. Later that night, my father knocked on the back door of the main house. He wasn't in a suit, just a sweatshirt and old jeans. I opened the door slowly and let him speak first. I failed you, he said. As a father. As a man. I was too proud. Too obsessed with control. With image. I thought if I let you go your own way, I'd lose everything I'd built. You did anyway, I said. I know. He swallowed. And the only thing I wish I could build now is a relationship with you. No expectations. No conditions. That I didn't expect. I took a breath, stepped outside, and sat on the bench.
He joined me quiet.
The air was cool, the night still. And for the first time since I was 20, we talked. Not as father and daughter, but as people.
Flawed.
Wounded.
Trying.
The next morning, they packed their things without being asked. They left the guest house clean, the bed made, a note on the kitchen counter. Emily, we don't expect forgiveness, but we are thankful you gave us a chance to remember what love should feel like. If you ever decide you can let us try again, we'll be waiting. Dad and Mom. I stood there for a long time, holding the note, the sun streaming through the window. My daughter ran into the kitchen a moment later, hair messy from sleep, clutching her teddy bear. Mom, who were those people? I crouched beside her and smoothed her hair. Just two people learning what it means to be sorry. She nodded like she understood, though she didn't. But someday she would. And when she did, she'd know that forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was strength.
Choice. Growth.
That storm I walked into at 20? It didn't break me. It shaped me. And when they came back 17 years later, begging for a sliver of the love they once denied me, I didn't slam the door. I let them see what they lost. And then I let myself begin to heal.